And good morning, everyone. I'm Wandy Lawson.
And I'm Jesse Freeman. Thank you so much for joining us for this Lawmakers Special presentation of Family Day 2007.
We're joined today in studio by Tom Crawford. He's the national editor of CapitolImpact.com. We'll be talking with Tom throughout the morning about the legislative action going on in both the House and the Senate. Tom, thanks so much for being here with us.
Great to be here.
For those of you who might not be familiar with Lawmakers, this program is daily coverage of the Georgia General Assembly's proceedings. This Saturday's session is being held by the legislature in order to offer people who might not normally have an opportunity to see the General Assembly in session the chance to watch representative government in action.
It's being called Family Day, and in both the House and Senate leadership, and Georgia Public Broadcasting will be carrying this session live until noon or whenever they break out today. This is the second Family Day at the Georgia State Capitol and our second Lawmakers Special broadcast of the proceedings. The first Family Day was back in 2005.
The House and the Senate have just convened, or they are about to convene, and today marks the 7th day of the Georgia General Assembly. The legislature is limited to only 40 session days by the Georgia State Constitution. This is a special day, but it is almost the halfway point. Tom, what can we expect to see today?
Well, Jesse, they do have several bills on the calendar in both the House and the Senate. I don't think you could consider any of them major bills, but they are certainly important to the folks that they affect. In the Senate, for example, they've got a bill that would make it illegal for people in penal institutions and prisons to take photographs of minors and display them on their walls. They've got some legislation that applies to child placement agencies, another bill that affects special elections. Over in the House, again, some fairly routine bills dealing with the duties of sheriffs, with deferred compensation plans, with Georgia State prison wardens and such as that. So our viewers will be able to see the legislative process in action, although nothing that's really that earth-shaking, I think.
And of course, we'll get a chance to see kind of how the business goes each morning. Of course, over on the Senate side, there are points of personal privilege when senators get a chance to speak their minds on various issues. They're called morning orders in the House. And of course, in 2005, we had a very interesting situation take place during our morning orders.
That is correct. There had been just the day before a very contentious and angry debate over the voter ID issue. And as you will recall, a lot of African-American legislators left the House chamber, and I believe the Senate chamber, too, to protest that particular bill, carrying chains and shackles and props like that. And I think there were still some hard feelings the next day, and one of the African-American legislators from Cobb County took the well of the House to express her opinion of the voter ID bill, started singing a civil rights anthem, and the Speaker of the House, Glenn Richardson, had to take some time gaveling her to order. And it caused quite a stir there, but it calmed down, and I think today's session will probably be a little calmer than it was 2 years ago.
Well, the leadership, of course, emphasizing this year that they want this to be a family day and not a time for personal protests and other things like that. I know last week House Speaker Glenn Richardson invited the head of the Georgia State Patrol in to try to brief legislators about what would be expected, including the parameters for which protests might be allowed and how far away from the Capitol they would have to be.
There will still be a couple of, I guess you could call them politically important events. At 9 o'clock a few minutes ago across the street at City Hall, there was a rally to support an increase in the state's minimum wage law, I believe at 11 o'clock, and we'll possibly be having a report on that. The pro-life groups will be having a get-together at the Capitol to talk about, is it House Bill 1, I believe,
Bill 1, yes,
that would put some restrictions on abortions in Georgia if it were to pass. So, again, politically important issues to the folks involved, and there is some of that going on today.
Well, as we get a chance to take a look at our House and Senate right now, we can see that they're coming back. They're in the House of Representatives right now. They're just coming to order, I believe. House Speaker Glenn Richardson is at the rostrum. We're going to take you there in just a few minutes to see that action. But before that, we want to just kind of brief you on some of the things that you might expect. Jesse, have you heard anything about what, I know Tom just mentioned some of those Senate bills that are coming. A lot of those coming from the website that the Republican legislators have set up.
They are. The Republican leadership has set up a website called GeorgiaSpeaks.com, and what they're doing is they're offering some of the citizens of the state to go on and log on and to suggest some bills that they'd like to see come through. And I think some of the bills that we're going to see, at least on the Senate side today, are coming from that website. Some of the more controversial ones, of course, I think they're not taking up today, but maybe even as soon as this week we may see some more of the controversial bills some bills dealing with sex offenders and some certain things like that.
Well, that's true. Well, as we are waiting for the action to take place here in the General Assembly, we want to talk to you a little bit about the Senate and those bills that are coming from the website, georgiaspeaks.com. Now, as Jesse just mentioned, the website was created by Republican leadership so the public can suggest laws or issues for the Georgia General Assembly to take up. And several of those Georgia Speaks bills have cleared the Senate Judiciary Committee last week, including Senate Bill 34, prohibiting inmates from keeping pictures in their cells. It was suggested by a prison warden in Alamo, Georgia.
It came to us from the warden named Ralph Kemp. Ralph is with us today. And Ralph, if you would tell us how this came to your attention and what the legislation does.
For a long time, I've always felt like the victims were forgotten in a lot of cases. It bothered me a lot. When I ran across some pictures that the inmate had in his possession, crime scene photographs and autopsy photographs, it bothered me even more. So I felt like that, especially in cases where sex offenders, where they might have photographs of their victims, that this was just wrong.
Also from Georgia Speaks, Senate Bill 71 requiring that special elections be held only in March or November. Senate President Pro Tem Eric Johnson sponsors Senate Bill 1 to prohibit registered sex offenders from taking pictures of minors.
Citizens ought to be more aggressive in bringing ideas for us. We know they do, and we know a lot of them come from them. But I think a lot of the citizens think they come from special interests and are all generated by lobbyists.
SB 86, sponsored by Senator Don Thomas, would require the drivers of pickup trucks to wear seat belts.
Should we allow children and adults to continue to be killed or severely injured? And especially, it's important now that I have clearance from Washington that we would qualify for a little over $20 million in federal funds.
Measures similar to Senate Bill 86 have been debated in the General Assembly in the past, but they failed to pass either chamber. And speaking of those chambers, we are about to take you live to our Family Day coverage. As you can see there, we have the Senate just convening. Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle is at the rostrum. Let's take a listen.
Senate Bill 130 by Senators Grant of the 25th, Whitehead of the 24th, Cowser of the 46th, and others. The bill will be entitled an act to amend Chapter 10 of Title 2 of the OCGA relating to agricultural marketing facilities, organizations, and programs.
State institutions.
Senate Bill 131 by Senator Hudgens of the 47th. Bill will be entitled an act to amend Article 9, Chapter 9 of Title 34 of the OCGA relating to
insurance and labor.
Senate Bill 132 by Senators Tarver of the 22nd, Powell of the 23rd, Brown of the 26th, and others. A bill will be entitled an act to amend Code Section 48-5-18 of the OCGA relating to the
finance.
And what we're doing now is we're hearing from an assistant to the clerk of the Senate who is reading bills that have been filed. Bills have to be read twice in the Senate floor before the full Senate, before they can be assigned to a committee. That will start the process. A bill will have a committee hearing, will be voted on the committee. If the committee favorably reports it, it will go through rules and then to the Senate floor. But right now you're hearing bills that have been filed, and they're just beginning the process here.
So we have our first readers going on, and of course Lieutenant Governor is signing those bills to committee at this point.
Lieutenant Governor.
Regulated industries.
Senate Bill 138 by Senators Harper of the 29th, Stoner of the 6th, Ailman, 42nd, and others. The bill to be entitled an act to amend Code Section 3-3-7 of the OCGA.
Regulated industries.
Senate Bill 139 by Senator Wiles of the 37th, Smith of the 52nd. The bill to be entitled an act to amend Chapter 12, Title 17 of the OCGA relating to
judiciary.
Senate Bill 140 by Senator Smith of the 52nd, Wiles of the 37th, Johnson of the 1st. Bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 2 of Chapter 12, Title
judiciary.
Senate Bill 141 by Senator Smith, the 52nd, Wiles of the 37th, Johnson of the 1st. A bill to be entitled an act to amend
judiciary.
Senate Bill 142 by Senator Smith, the 52nd, Wiles of the 37th, Johnson of the 1st. A bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 2 of Chapter 12, Title 17 of the OCGA relating to public defenders so as to clarify the circuit public defenders may hire additional personnel only if authorized.
Judiciary.
Senate Bill 143 by Senator Wiles of the 37th. The bill to be entitled an act to amend Article 4, Chapter 21.
Judiciary.
Senate Resolution 243 by Senators Harper of the 29th, Hooks of the 14th, Seabaugh of the 28th, and others. A resolution to urge the United States Army Corps of Engineers and the United States
natural resources.
And again, now you're seeing Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle. This is his first year as Georgia's Republican Lieutenant Governor. He's taking over for a Democrat, Mark Taylor. Tom, there's been a little bit of a shift in power in this chamber now that a Republican is in this chair. We've had a Republican majority for several years now, but now we have a Republican majority as well as a president of the Senate.
That's correct. Casey Cagle is the first Republican to serve in the office of Lieutenant Governor. And a few years ago, as you mentioned, when the Republicans took the majority control of the Senate, they removed some of the powers that the Democratic Lieutenant Governor, Mark Taylor, had enjoyed. Now that a Republican is back in that office, they have restored those powers to Casey Cagle. And he's carrying out really the traditional role that Lieutenant Governor has always carried out, which is to make sure the bills go to the right committees, to control the flow of business in the Senate, to moderate the debate that happens every day in the Senate chamber. And of course, every lieutenant governor we've ever had has wound up running for governor at some point. So who knows, maybe we'll see Casey Cagle running in that race as well. But things really are back to normal now that you have the majority in the Senate and the lieutenant governor of the same political party.
And rumors certainly fly of certain things like that. People who may and who may not run for governor. Another man who's been mentioned that is House Speaker Glenn Richardson. House Speaker Richardson, of course, presides over the House. I think we're ready to go and check out what's going on in the House of Representatives at this moment.
Apostolic ministry to senior pastors. Please give a Georgia General Assembly welcome to our pastor of the day, Pastor Tony Brock.
Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. I'm excited about being here on Family Day. Are you glad to have your families here with you? Those of you that I can see them out there, and as you heard with my resume a moment ago, which, great job, thank you. I sounded better than I feel this morning with what he read. But as a youth pastor and, of course, 3 wonderful children of my own, and I'm going to speak about courage today, the courage to make decisions, the courage to be a dynamic father, a courage to be a history maker. But being a youth pastor and having children, I understand and realize that if the backside goes numb, the brain is soon to follow. So I know many of you have children that are with you, and those that are wiggling around, so I'm aware of that. I'll keep this very, very brief, but hopefully it'll be important. For my text this morning, I felt like the Lord would want me to speak on the seasons of change. And change will always require a level of courage that I don't believe that we actually have in us. It's something that maybe there's a portion there, but change will require us to reach out to something larger and greater than ourselves. I'm reminded in Deuteronomy chapter 31 where Moses already knew that there was change that was taking place. Now, let me just tell you that, and you know this because you are governing, you are sitting here and you're deciding great changes that are taking place here in this nation, or here in this state, which also affects the nation, as well as you have children and your family there. And we know that change is taking place every day. I say it often at my church, Hope and Life Fellowship.
And, of course, we are hearing the morning devotional there in the House of Representatives. It's the way that one of the procedures that they have every morning. Various representatives have a chance to invite religious figures from their own districts. Representative Melvin Everson introducing today's pastor, Tony Brock, from the Hope and Life Fellowship Church in Snellville. And it's just another one of the procedural things that they go through every morning. Although for some it's kind of taken on a very special mission. It's said that as long as there is a Georgia legislature, there is going to be an opening devotion every single morning. This is obviously not done in legislatures all over the country, but it's felt to be a very important part of starting the day here in Georgia.
As each child was added to our family, I seem to also have added gray hair. It was just an outgrowth of the intensity, the courage that was required to be a father, to be a husband, to be a man of God, to be a pastor, but to be someone that knew that there were great responsibilities. And I'll use a word that I'm sure you're familiar with, a sacred trust, of I being not just a man of God, not just a pastor, but a husband that would love my wife. I'm very honored to have my family here with me. And but also that father that I should be. And so, knowing that change is a part of my life, and it's also a part of yours, I use that as a backdrop where in Deuteronomy 31, Moses begins to speak and says, "Be strong of good courage. Do not fear nor be afraid of them." Now, he's referring to the enemy, of course, that they would face, but he was speaking to the people of Israel as well as he was speaking to Joshua, because it's not about the enemies that we face. It's not about the circumstances or the situations that are on the horizon. It's not about those things that we even know the Word of God says we can't boast about tomorrow, for we don't know what our tomorrow truly holds. I can speak about that because it was in Cartersville, Georgia, another part of this great state, that 21 years ago I was seated on a pastor's couch after a Sunday night service. My father had ministered. I was there with my dad, and the kind of church denomination that I grew up in, if you don't have food and fellowship afterwards, then we don't consider you having church. And so some of you out there as well feel the same way. But we were meeting for food and fellowship, and then a phone call came that brought about great change. A phone call where the pastor took that phone call back in the back room, And, you know, when growing up in a pastor's home, when pastor goes to the back room, well, obviously it's something with one of his parishioners. It's something intense he needs to talk about. But a strange thing took place where that pastor came back in and knelt right down in front of my father. Now, let me say this once again, Deuteronomy 31. He knew change was coming. He said, be strong and of good courage. Courage is not the absence of fear. It's in the face of fear that we press on. Courage is that we don't somehow feel our heart race or our face flush and our ears begin to burn because of us knowing what we're facing and that it's greater than ourselves. It's in the face of that, in the full awareness of that we press on, that we move on, that we embrace the moment, that we're in the moment, and that we know that we cannot stop nor quit. He was saying, change is coming. I'm not crossing over with you into the promised land. This young man, Joshua, that has been my assistant, he'll take you. This pastor that came in and knelt before my father, knelt right there, and it was very uncomfortable. It was one of those, maybe you've heard of Space Invaders. It's not the video game you played back many years ago, if you were there at that time, but it's someone that gets really, really close. So close that it's uncomfortable. So close you want to stay back up. You know, you're invading my space. He looked in my father's eyes, and I didn't know the message he would have to deliver, but he spoke to my father.
And there you see the House chamber as they are listening to their morning devotional, and you see quite a few legislators with their family members in there. There are a lot of cute kids here on the Capitol grounds today. Of course, we're celebrating Family Day here at the Capitol, and in addition to the regular scheduled business of the day, the purpose is said that they want to invite the state of Georgia, citizens, to have a chance to come on down and see how the business of the day works. And so obviously in the House and in the Senate, one of the things that goes on is to have that pastor or sometimes a rabbi come in and deliver those morning devotions. So we're going to get back to some of the action as it continues throughout the day, but thought we might take a brief intermission to talk about some of the legislation that we might be seeing today and some of the other procedures that might be coming through. You have, we're discussing some of the Senate bills that were possibly on the calendar. What do you see coming through on the House side?
Well, on the House side, these seem to be very technical bills that, again, perhaps not as much of interest to our mainstream audience as others would be. For example, spelling out what certain things sheriffs have to do under certain conditions, setting up a special pay plan for state employees, making some changes in the Criminal Justice Improvement Council. Again, things that are sometimes hard to explain to a general audience, but all very important in how state government is set up and in how it operates as well.
And Tom, we're seeing some of those things today, and people can kind of see what the process is like, but some of the things that might affect Georgians or might grab their attention more. What are some of the bills that have been before the House so far this session?
Well, Jesse, underlying the whole session right now, and I know we have talked about this on past episodes of the Lawmakers, is the whole issue of peach care and whether we will be able, or whether the state will be able to get enough money from the federal government to keep the program going, because as you know, it provides health insurance for more than 270,000 children in Georgia who otherwise would not have health insurance. And it's such an important issue that it's holding up really work on the state budget. It's holding up decisions on how state health plans will be run, because they need to know, are we going to get this $50 million or $100 million from the federal government to keep peach care running? And once they can get an answer to that question, then they can decide what to do on that, and then a whole lot of other things will fall into place too. But that really has become, and I know Nwandi would agree, the most important issue really, or the one that's got the most attention of legislators this session.
Absolutely. And of course, House Speaker Glenn Richardson, weighing in on one way, I guess, to kind of try to close that shortfall, has introduced his own legislation to change the mechanism for allowing families to register for peach care. Yes,
he is. What he is trying to do is to tighten up the eligibility standards, and what it means is fewer children would be eligible for peach care. I've heard estimates of as much as 20,000, and again, that would certainly save money for the program, but it also defeats the purpose perhaps of trying to cover as many kids as you can with health insurance. I know that we were talking to Lieutenant Governor Cagle yesterday, and he was of the opinion that perhaps a way can be found to broaden the coverage of peach care so that more children perhaps can get health insurance coverage.
And we just saw the morning devotional on the House side. I think now we're going to go over to the Senate side. They also have what we call a pastor of the day every day. And let's see what's going on in the Senate chamber.
You know, this year, or this past week rather, we've had 3 deaths that have been noted in the news, or 4 deaths rather, 3 were local.
You'll see this is Reverend Ronnie Brannon from Covington. He was introduced today by Senator John Douglas. You'll see him in the bottom right of your screen, seated there. It's a privilege for each of these senators and for the House members to bring usually a constituent of theirs from their district, a preacher or a rabbi or some faith member. And of course, they all don't get a chance to do it every session. There's 56 senators, 180 representatives, but someone does it every morning.
My challenge to you is to be faithful. Don't worry about making the headlines. Make a difference. Make a difference for this great state and this great country. And I thank you for the difference that you're making. May we pray together. Father, your word tells us that faith without works is dead. But it goes on to tell us that faith is working in those works, and those works are the perfecter of faith. Father, may we continue to be about the works and tasks you have before us. Even in those times when we wonder why we may even be in the middle of it, Father, let us be aware that we're here to make a difference. I thank you for these distinguished men and women for serving this great state, this great country, and serving you. Father, I ask that you would bless them, that you would grant them wisdom and direction, and in all our works may our faith be perfected for your glory. For we pray all these things in the name of the Father, of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Amen.
Thank you so much, Pastor. I know the senators want to greet you down front.
And you just saw Reverend Brannon delivering the morning prayer. Tom, what are some of the other traditions that we see go on each morning?
Well, the General Assembly, the leadership is a big believer in procedures and protocols and rituals that some of which date back to the British Parliament, which is what our General Assembly is really originally based on. We've seen the morning devotionals that they have. Each morning they also make a very big deal of turning and pledging the flag in both the House and the Senate as a sign of respect, of course, to Georgia and to the national government. Every day in both chambers, as you know, the individual legislators will bring guests from their hometown or from their home district. Sometimes it's a local high school football team that may have won a state championship, and they'll introduce them, give them a chance to say a few words to the legislators, give them their moment in the spotlight, if you will. It's a real feel-good moment both for the legislators and the folks they represent back home. A lot of times if there's a message to be brought from the House to the Senate or from the Senate to the House, you'll see the Sergeant-at-Arms come down the aisle of the Senate and take a bow and say, Mr. President, I'm happy to present the Honorable so-and-so and so-and-so. So they're a very big believer in procedure and ritual because they see it as a sign both of respect for the historic traditions of the General Assembly and a way of maintaining, I think, order and discipline among the members as well.
And of course, those first and second readers of bills also have some history behind them.
Mm-hmm. That dates back to the early days of the General Assembly when a lot of the legislators were not able to read. And there was a big scandal back then known as the Yazoo land fraud, where the state was defrauded of millions of dollars worth of property by a bunch of land speculators. And they made it a part of the state constitution that from here on out, every bill will be read aloud so that legislators will know what they're actually voting on. Now, happily today, every member of the legislature is literate and can read and write, but that's again another ritual that hangs over from the past and that we still honor in today's proceedings.
And I know that it's a very, you could say, a diverse group of people that make up the body. Kind of give us an example of some of the fields that some of the different senators and representatives come from.
Well, in the old days, of course, everybody who served was either a lawyer or perhaps a farmer from back home. These days, there's a much wider diversity of occupations. There is even in the House of Representatives a fellow named Brian Thomas from Gwinnett who is an archaeologist. I think he's believed to be the only archaeologist serving in a state legislature in the entire country. You still have lawyers, perhaps not as many of them. You have educators. David Casas in the House is a school teacher. Kathy Cox, Kathy with a K, Cox, who's now the school superintendent, was also a school teacher when she was serving in the House of Representatives. So there's a much wider range of occupations now, but generally speaking, you have to be fairly affluent to be able to take the time off every year to serve in the General Assembly. So probably leans more heavily to self-employed people, people who run their own businesses, in some cases retired people who have the time to devote to the job.
That's interesting. Well, we're going to, of course, go back and see more of the Family Day activities, but a lot of those, as Tom was mentioning, are going to have a lot to do with the ceremony. In fact, our 40-day session, you mentioned that we used to have a large percentage of farmers in our legislature, and I guess our constitutional 40-day session has to do with that as well.
Well, and that's one reason why it takes place in January and February and March, because you don't grow many crops in the dead of winter, and the local farmer could take the time off to come up here and serve in the General Assembly. Again, another vestige of the past, if you will, that carries over to today.
Well, a lot has changed in all those years, but of course those traditions and rituals continue. We are going to take you back into our General Assembly coverage in just a few minutes, but we also wanted to just take time. We had mentioned before that Peach Care is, of course, taking a very, very large issue on the table at this point, because it's actually stalling the budget process, both the supplemental as well as the 2008 budget. But we wanted to talk about some of the other big issues that are kind of hanging over the General Assembly right now.
Well, I think the pro-life, pro-choice issue we talked about earlier, House Bill 1 that Representative Bobby Franklin has introduced, I think would put quite a few restrictions on abortions. Representative James Mills, who's also in the House, has a bill that is in committee, and I think will come out of committee for a floor vote, which would require women who seek the procedure, women who seek an abortion, to have an ultrasound performed, and then to be given the choice of viewing the results of the ultrasound. And I think the hope is that sometimes a woman might change her mind about having an abortion. So that will no doubt have a lot of spirited debate when it gets to the floor.
Another big issue, especially on the Senate side, is education reform, and some of the few bills that we have seen gone through have dealt with some education, largely from the platform of Lieutenant Governor Casey Cagle.
Right. Lieutenant Governor Cagle has a couple of bills that have passed the Senate and are headed over to the House, and hard to say when they might get a vote over there, but that is his big education package. One of his bills would allow entire school systems, not just the individual schools, to apply for a charter system status that would enable all of their schools to basically exempt the state regulations and laws on education. The feeling being that they would be free to experiment with some new ways of teaching kids, some innovative ways of teaching kids. Another bill that the Lieutenant Governor had introduced provides some funding for additional career academies, which are high schools that would team up with the local technical colleges to offer job training classes along with the normal high school courses, in the hopes of giving the state a better educated workforce. So those are a couple of big ideas that are out there right now, and we'll hear more about them, I think, as the session goes on.
We heard the Georgia PTAs weighing in earlier this week, saying that the charter school systems was one that they were definitely opposed to. They were saying that if government wanted to actually give educators more room to breathe, then perhaps they should pass laws that would allow them to do that, rather than letting certain school systems exempt themselves from the laws.
And they made the point that last year, in last year's session, the General Assembly passed a bill, I think, initiated by Governor Perdue to require all systems to spend 65% of their yearly budget on what are defined as classroom expenditures. And the feeling among some people, including the Georgia PTA, was that perhaps you need to give some systems, especially in rural areas, a little more flexibility to adjust to the needs of the local systems.
Another measure that has passed the Senate, of course, dealing with education, was the voucher bill, allowing special needs students to opt out of public education.
Right. That was from Senate President Pro Tem Eric Johnson from Savannah. If you are the mother or the father of a child with a disability or some kind of special need within the school system, and you felt it could be better served by putting your child in a private school, you would be able to get the state share of whatever your special education funding is, and I believe the estimate's $9,000 per child, and use that to apply against the tuition that might be involved in sending the child to a private school. I imagine in most cases that wouldn't be enough, but there's the thought again that it would allow parents more choice in what to do about their children's needs.
Thank you, Tom. Now, on this special day, there are activities for children and adults alike in and around the Capitol. Fire trucks, classic cars, Humvees, snakes, owls, and even a helicopter are all featured. Many families have gathered under the Gold Dome for these activities and to see the legislature at work. To find out more about Family Day from a family perspective, our own Sandra Parrish joins us live from the Capitol with some special guests. Sandra.
That's right, Jesse. I do have a special guest with me. I have my daughter Erin, who is 8 years old. Say hello.
Hello.
And I have my youngest daughter Emily, who is almost 6. Say hello.
Hello.
And we've had lots of fun things to do here. You mentioned some of the things that folks can see if they come down here. And actually, it's a little too cold to do the inflatable slide outside right now, but there is an inflatable slide. They have the street blocked off right out front. And they have the GBI has some of its cars. They've got its robot out there that actually goes into bomb scenes and checks those out. And down here in the Rotunda area, we have a lot of demonstrations. Erin, tell me some of the things that you've done so far this morning.
Well, I went fishing, and I got a book. I saw the Declaration of Independence, and I got to touch animal skins.
And you also met 2 very special gentlemen, didn't you? Tell me who they were.
Representative Everson and, what was the other? Senator Balfour.
And those are our representative and senator, right?
Right.
And Emily, what have you seen so far today that you've had fun with?
I've seen these 2 jugglers that taught us lots of tricks, and we saw animal skins. We saw shooting people that were shooting animals, and we also got some stuff from PBS Kids.
And you both got a book. They're giving away books today. The Imagine the Possibilities organization is down there giving away free books to children who come up. So that's an exciting time as well. Erin mentioned the Declaration of Independence. The Secretary of State's copy, Georgia's official copy, is down there on display in the Rotunda. It will actually be there, I believe, Monday as well. So if you miss it today, you can come back on Monday and see it as well. And it's dating back from 1777, so quite an old document down there for everyone to enjoy. We saw the animal skins, I believe they mentioned. We have deer and rabbit and possum. So if you've never actually seen one up close and personal, you can actually go and touch one of those. And a live snake is down there as well. Reporting now live inside the Capitol, I'm Sandra Parrish for Lawmakers.
Well, thank you very much, Sandra. That was very great. I don't know if I'm going to touch the snake, though, but maybe some of the animal skins.
I think Sandra has some future television talent on her hands there. Those girls look ready to talk.
Yes, indeed. They're ready to go.
Now I think we're going to take it over to the Senate and see what's happening in that chamber.
Thank you, Mr. President. Thank you very much. Appreciate their service. Senator from the 29th is recognized for a point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President. As you all know, last year there was a very heated battle.
And this is Senator Seth Hart from down the Columbus area. He's taking a point of personal privilege that we referenced earlier. This is his opportunity to talk about basically whatever's on his mind.
That's folks that do divorces for a living. As a result of my dogged determination to try to bring the child support laws in Georgia into the 21st century, and the passage of Senate Bill 382, I was awarded last year what is affectionately known as the bone. And the bone is one of these large dog bones for being bone-headed. This year, I gave my fellows in the American Academy the bone back, and I wanted to share each with y'all. You will find Senate Bill 382 memorialized in this gold bone, which you will find to be a very fine chocolate. I wish all of you well. We've got a lot of children here, and I thought we'd really hype them up by filling them full of good chocolate. So y'all have a great day today and enjoy the bone. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator. We have, and the Lieutenant Governor gets one. How about that? All right. Make me fat and happy. Recognize the distinguished majority leader for a point of personal privilege, the senator from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I think all of you senators will agree that we have one of the finest budget offices in the state of Georgia, the Senate Budget Office. And when the Republicans took over the reins of government a few years ago, we had an awful situation in terms of a deficit, about $1 billion in the hole, and just lots of problems. And we created our own budget office. The the former budget office was called the Legislative Budget Office, but it was really the House Budget Office. And I think all of you would agree that we have the finest budget director in the nation. He's helped us understand the process for governing in terms of making sure that every dollar is accounted for, that we have a good understanding of all those dollars. And he's in the audience with his parents today. Y'all help me recognize Kevin Fillion's parents today.
Thank you very much, Senator. Chair recognizes the distinguished senator from the 55th District for point of personal privilege.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the Senate. I would like to extend a welcome to all of the visitors here today, but especially to the women. On behalf of the women of the Senate, to the women of these great men in this body, thank you. If it wasn't for you, we wouldn't be able to take control over these men as we do. It's with your help at home that enable us to tell them what to do. So again, I say thank you. I'd like to recognize my daughter, Leslie, that's here all the time. Her fiance, D'Amico Moses, and his son, 60-year-old, I always forget his name, Jalen. But again, I'd like to thank the women for coming out this morning. I know they're on Saturdays and Sundays, there are a lot of things that you have to do at home, but you took the time to come out and be with us today. I hope you have a great time. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Senator. The chair recognizes the distinguished senator from the 43rd District at this time.
And with the Senate continuing with points of personal privilege, we are going to take you over to the House. That's where right now we are having first readers. There you see Robbie Rivers reading those bills, as Tom mentioned earlier, dating back to a time when the legislators were not able to read them necessarily themselves. And so those bills are now going through. He's reading the preamble to each of the bills, and then the House Speaker Glenn Richardson is signing each one to a committee.
House Bill 371 by Representative Mills, 25th, a bill to be entitled Act authorizes the City of Flowery Branch to exercise all redevelopment powers. And that one is.
Intergovernmental coordination.
House Bill 372 by Representative Ash, 56th, a bill to be entitled Act amend Code Section 57-395 relating to credit for service in private schools toward retirement benefits on the Teacher Retirement Fund of Georgia, so as to provide that members of that retirement system may obtain credible service for prior service.
Retirement.
House Bill 373 by Representative Bridges, the 10th, a bill to be entitled Act amending Code Section 47-223 relating to retirement benefits in the Employees Retirement System of Georgia for those in the Service Uniform Division, Department of Public Safety, to provide that such person may return to full-time employment and retain their retirement benefits.
Retirement.
House Bill 374 by Representative Mills, the 25th, a bill to be entitled Act amending Title 48 relating to hotel, motel tax and change certain provisions regarding definitions.
Ways and Means.
House Bill 375 by Representative Collins, the 27th, the bill to be entitled Act amending Title 20 relating to compulsory attendance and students in elementary and secondary education, so as provided children who serve as pages in General Assembly shall be credited as present by the school in which they are enrolled. And
of course you hear the House Clerk there, Robbie Rivers, reading those bills extremely fast. I don't know how he does that. We were earlier seeing those points of personal privilege there in the Senate, beginning with Senator Seth Harp. He was talking about a child support measure from the last session, but of course best known perhaps this session for his introduction of legislation to perhaps permit Sunday sales of beer, wine, and maybe liquor here in Georgia.
That is correct. Senator Harp has tapped into an issue, if you'll pardon the expression, that I think a lot of Georgians are interested in. Georgia is one of only 3 states, I believe, where you cannot go to your local grocery store or package store on Sunday and buy beer or wine. The only way you can get it is if you go to a bar or a restaurant. Senator Harp has introduced 2 or 3 bills that have to do with that particular issue. One version would allow for the sale of just beer and wine on Sunday. A more up-to-date version would allow liquor to be sold as well on Sundays, but only after 12 noon, I believe. And in each case, the local jurisdiction, the city or the county, the voters would have to decide whether or not they wanted to have this particular type of commerce on Sunday. But again, that is one I think some of our viewers have a personal interest in. I know I do. And we'll be watching those bills very closely as they work their way through the Senate.
Well, it's definitely a bill that has been proclaimed dead several times and has managed to revive itself rather heartily each and every time. I know early in the session the governor saying potentially or insinuating that he might veto that if it were to pass, it coming back. And of course, they've had some revisions. It's actually, I guess, 3 bills that are currently going through with various, as you mentioned, various provisions dealing with when the liquor can be sold or the type of alcohol that can be sold. But with the Georgia Chamber of Commerce behind it as well as the retailers, it seems to be not dead yet.
No, it's not dead. It's not a sure thing either, but I know most people have felt throughout the session that there's a 50-50 chance that it might at least get a serious vote and some serious consideration. So it's something that could happen. There's a lot of sentiment on the other side, of course. Folks who would like to see the sale of alcohol continue to be prohibited on Sunday. So it'll stir up a lot of discussion between now and the end of the session.
Pardon the pun, and it's raising spirits too. And I think,
indeed,
I think Senator Harp is in a unique position why that would be important to him, because he's near a border, isn't he?
Yes, he is. Columbus is right on the border of Alabama, and Senator Harp pointed out that in cities like Columbus and in Thomasville by the Florida border and in Augusta over by South Carolina, you have a lot of, again, pardon the expression, leakage on Sundays from folks who are going over the border to buy their beer and wine, and it's costing the state, quite frankly, millions of dollars in taxes that they might otherwise be collecting. So there's a budgetary argument you can make on the issue as well.
Well, that's very interesting. We're going to be going back over to our chambers in just a few moments, but I guess we'll take a few minutes just to talk about some of the other legislative issues that have been heating up. One of the stories, I guess, Tom, now is actually the pace at which this session has been proceeding, perhaps not as fast as some previous years.
I think it's very safe to say that. The other day, House Majority Leader Jerry Keene was having a discussion with us and made the observation that they went 10 entire days without passing a single bill in the House, which was something he was rather proud of. Speaker Glenn Richardson has said for years that, in his personal opinion, the legislature passes too many bills, we pass too many laws. So they obviously have made a concerted effort to shut the pipeline down this year. There have been very few bills that have passed or been debated in the House, and as we saw on today's calendar, not many of real importance yet. There have been a few more bills that have passed in the Senate. They've been a little bit busier over there, but when you look at all things considered, it has been probably the slowest start I've ever seen to a session, no question.
Tom, one of the major issues that was talked about on some of the campaign trails and has been talked about in the early going is tax reform, but we're not really seeing any major legislation filed on that subject either, are we?
No, we're not, and what they're going to do is basically study the issue this session. I know Glenn Richardson said recently that we'll probably wait, or they will probably wait until next year to actually vote on any kind of bills that would change or restructure the tax system. So this is a year to study and discuss and digest some of the information, and next year will be a time to make some decisions and act on it.
Perhaps as a test balloon, the governor's proposal to actually eliminate the income tax on retirement income for seniors.
That's right. It would affect the more affluent senior citizens in Georgia because they already have a tax exemption on the first $35,000 in retirement income. The governor wants to eliminate state income tax entirely on all retirement income. And I believe the impact of that would be roughly $142 million a year that would no longer be coming into the state treasury. So you certainly have some decisions to make at that point. Do we have to cut services to make up for the fact that there's less revenue coming in or not? So that's all part of the mix that needs to be discussed whenever you talk about changing the tax laws.
Well, it is interesting. The American Association of Retired Persons opposed to that measure, saying that the revenues will dry up. Of course, those who support it saying that that will free up the seniors to use the funds to pump back into the system in other ways.
Right. And then there's also the argument, too, that our senior citizens do go to the doctor more often, go to the hospital more often. There's a larger drain, if you will, on state resources and health care resources. So, again, a lot of factors that have to be looked at here in changing the tax laws.
But that is something that the governor talked about in his State of the State address. Now, he's one figure that we may not see today, but he's a big part of what we cover every day. What is the governor's agenda that he kind of laid out for this session?
Well, the major thing was the tax exemption for the senior citizens. He has also talked about boosting the state's tourism by spending, $19 or $20 million on building boat ramps and facilities to attract bass fishing tournaments. I believe he calls it Go Fish Georgia. Go Fish Georgia. Feeling that tourism, which is, of course, a very important industry, could stand a boost on that. Other than that, he's had actually a very light agenda for this particular year. He may be announcing some things later, but he's really taking it easy, I think, sitting back and letting the legislature have its say.
Well, his Hope Chest Amendment, of course, clearing committee yesterday. That's
Correct.
one part of his agenda to, as he says, protect the lottery funds more than they have been in previous state history. Yes, that particular amendment would restrict the spending of Georgia lottery funds only to Hope Scholarships or to the pre-K program. There is somewhat of a similar restriction to that already in the state constitution, but he feels there needs to be even stronger language tying that down. So that will come up for a Senate vote, I think, fairly soon, and I think it will pass this year. It lost last year because the Democrats opposed it, and as you know, a constitutional amendment requires a 2/3 vote to pass, but there's some indications it may pass this year.
And as a constitutional amendment that exists as a resolution, that's one of two types of legislation that can come through bills or resolutions, and that exists in the Senate now. Let's go to the Senate chamber and see what's going on the Senate floor. There you see the Republican Majority Leader, Tommy Williams from Lyons, at the well.
Service of government. It might be you just calling or logging online and saying, you know, I'm having trouble with one of the agencies of the state, and I'd like for you to address that problem. Well, this constituent happens to be a warden at one of the prisons. We privatize some of our prisons, and this comes to us from Ralph Kemp, who's currently the warden at the private prison in Alamo, Georgia. Now, not a lot of us actually have the opportunity to go inside of a prison, so if there were changes to be made in that prison, we wouldn't know it unless someone who works there actually gets in touch with us and says, hey, we got a problem here. Well, Ralph Kemp logged on to our website, and Ralph is not extremely computer literate, but he said, you know, I'm going to try this. So he types in www.georgiaspeaks.com and types in the idea form. We've got a problem in our prisons. Prisoners have access to the photographs, whether it's an autopsy photograph, a police
and Senator Tommy Williams there in the well explaining Senate Bill 34, one of the bills that has come through on the GeorgiaSpeaks.com website, talking about that warden from Alamo, Georgia, who came online and suggested that prisoners not be allowed to keep pictures of their victims in their cells while they're incarcerated. And so he's presenting that and also letting folks know that it is open to the public to be able to present bills and ideas for the General Assembly on GeorgiaSpeaks.com.
This ought not to be. So what we did is we introduced a bill on behalf of Warden Kemp. We passed it out of the committee, and today we have it on the floor for a vote. And that's exactly what the bill does. It says a prisoner cannot have access except if it's in conjunction with his appeal process. In other words, the judge would have to allow this to happen based on his appeal of his case. So the vote today is to say to Mr. Kemp, we believe you had a good idea. And so I ask my senators today to please vote yes on this bill that Warden Kemp has brought to our attention, and let's do right by the citizens of Georgia. Mr. President, there are no questions. I'll yield the well.
Thank you, Senator. There are no questions. Does any other senator wish to speak for or against the bill? Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which is favorable to the passage of the bill? The chair hears none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall the main question be now put? Are there any objections? The chair hears none, and the main question is ordered. Shall this bill now pass? The question is on the passage of the bill. All those in favor will vote aye. Those opposed, vote no. And the secretary will unlock the machine. And now the voting begins there in the Senate.
We'll take a few minutes there for all the senators to come and register at their positions for their votes, either in favor or against SB 34, the measure to prevent prisoners from keeping pictures of their victims in their cells, as we mentioned before, coming from that GeorgiaSpeaks.com website.
As you see, many of the senators have some of their family members there with them. Those are actually electronic voting machines. They each have a tabulation device there at their desk, and they can register a yes or no vote. If you see an E, that is someone who's been excused, whether with business outside of the Capitol or a personal issue they need to address, and you see there are several senators who are excused today. And as that clock ticks down, you'll see we'll have our final vote on SB 34.
Lighting up there. Looks like we don't have opposition to that measure as the first of the Family Day votes coming in the Senate there, and the passage of SB 34.
On the passage of the bill, the yeas are 41 and the nays are 0. This bill, having received requisite constitutional majority, to gavel it in is the distinguished senator from the 19th's lovely daughter. This bill is therefore passed. Congratulations, Senator.
Looked like Senator Williams' daughter got a little bit of a jolt there as she gavelled the passage of that bill.
Yes, but again, all part of the ritual. As the bill passes, the gavel comes down.
Senator from the 39th.
The bill is on its way to our official code of Georgia.
That's right. Well, as all of the bills obviously have to make it through both chambers, so that passage there in the Senate now signals that it's ready to be taken up over on the House side. And when it goes over to the other chamber, the process starts all over again in terms of the first reader and then needing to be assigned to committee, going through the committee process, and then coming out for the second reader and then coming to the floor for a vote. So it starts all over again.
Indeed. Each chamber is really a mirror image of the other. They both go through the same process as they take each other's bills in like that.
And the House can agree to the bill as it came over to them, or they can amend it in committee. They can also amend it on the floor. Now, if the House passes something that is not exactly what came over from the Senate, or vastly different than came over from the Senate, what happens then, Tom?
Well, the bill goes back to the Senate, in fact, to the sponsor of the bill, and he looks at it, and if he's okay with the changes, he will ask his senators, I'll move to agree with the House version of bill whatever. And they'll usually, as a courtesy, do that. If he does not like the changes, or if he thinks too many changes were made, he'll say, I move that we disagree with the House version of this Senate bill. And if the other senators go along, and they typically do, then what they will appoint is a conference committee, 3 House members, 3 senators, that will sit down and try to work out a compromise version of the bill that will be acceptable to both chambers. Usually they can work out a compromise, but sometimes late in the session they're not able to, and a bill dies for that very reason. They just couldn't reach an agreement on it.
And that's when a lot of the brass tacks of the legislation gets hammered out. There's really an inertia that builds up as the session progresses. You know, we mentioned it's been very slow going, and that's not unusual for January and early into February, but a lot of action really starts happening when we get to a special day. It's crossover day, day 30.
Crossover day, yes. It used to be day 33, but it's now day 30, I believe. And crossover day means that if a bill has originated in the Senate, it needs to be passed by the Senate by day 30, or they don't take it up in the House. Same for a House bill. It needs to be approved by the House before the Senate will accept it for further action on it. So if your bill has not made it out of its original chamber by day 30, it's dead for the session.
Now, of course, one of the ways to revive that is to amend it in one of those notorious conference committees. Something can pop up that we thought was dead for the session, and there's all sorts of things to look for as the session progresses.
That's true. If a legislator can't get his bill out, he can always look for a bill that's kind of sort of similar to it and attach his bill as an amendment. And that happens quite often in the closing days, Jesse, as you know, and it's one of the things that makes it such a confusing organization to cover as we get closer to adjournment.
It certainly does. That's when we really start to put in the long hours. Now, as action continues inside the chambers, activity in the Capitol also continues to increase. And keeping with our Family Day theme, lawmaker Sandra Parrish is standing by with some very special people to me. Sandra.
That's right, Jesse. I have your family here with me. We have Representative Alan Freeman of Macon and his 2 daughters. We have Caroline, who is almost 8, and Allison, who is 4. How are you girls?
Good. Good.
Tell me, what are some of the things that you've got to do yet or that you're looking forward to do?
Going down and jumping in the bouncies, and we've got to sit on the floor with my daddy.
Yeah? What did you think of that?
It was really fun.
Well, tell me some of the things that you saw in there.
Lots of people.
Lots of people, and you saw the House Speaker, and you saw them passing probably a lot of papers back and forth, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah. What have you thought so far, Allison?
Not going to talk?
All right. Well, let's talk with Dad for just a minute. And so, Representative Freeman, tell me what Family Day means to you.
You know, it's a great time for Georgia to actually see what the House Representatives and the Senate does, their government really in action. I think it's great that we can plan this on Saturday and bring families in. You know, I talk to my girls about government all the time, but for them to be here and be part of it, it's really special for me. And I think the people back home appreciate it as well through your TV show. So we appreciate what you're doing. But it's a great time to display our government at work.
Well, now, 2 years ago when we had the first Family Day, it was actually touted as repealing some old Jim Crow laws that were still on Georgia's books, and they're actually doing something similar today.
Any time we can take laws off the books, I think that's important. And most of the time, there's laws that we're not using, and it's a good time to kind of clean up some of our books. And they've started as a tradition, and I hope we can continue that.
All right, great. Anything else you're looking forward to doing today?
Well, I always enjoy going by and seeing DNR, and they've got some great exhibits this year about outdoors and sporting events and about fishing. You know, the governor's got a great bill that he's promoting, the $50 million for fishing, so I'm going to go by and see that. But real excited about taking the girls to see the exhibits.
All right, great. Now, I was telling them in Wandy and Jesse, there is a fishing display downstairs. My little girls got to actually reel in a big mouth bass. So there's lots of things you can do down there as well. So thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks a lot.
Reporting live inside the Capitol, I'm Sandra Parrish for Lawmakers.
Thank you, Sandra. Thank you for doing that. I'm sure that for those of you who aren't totally clear, Alan is my first cousin. I'm sure my Uncle Doug and Aunt Margaret are very glad to see him and the girls on television.
Your cousins are so cute.
They look nothing like me. That's why.
Well, of course, the Family Day activity continuing there in the Capitol, but also some of the business of the day as well, with Representative Freeman telling us that the House is going to be dealing with a lot of repeal measures, not perhaps as high profile as those Jim Crow laws they repealed in 2005, but still important nevertheless, I suppose.
That's right. They have a special code revision committee now that they have set up in the House that goes through the state laws and tries to pick out those that perhaps have become obsolete, no longer apply to modern day circumstances, or there's really no need to have them cluttering up the books. So they'll go through and repeal that section of the law. That is what they're doing with 3 or 4 of the bills, I think, on the House calendar today. And as you noted, they did that 2 years ago with a lot of the old Jim Crow era laws. Just went and struck them from the books.
And right now we're going over to the Senate, where we're having a vote on Senate Bill 61.
That deals with child placement agencies and how you have to check the criminal history records before you take a child to a child placement agency. So certainly a good public safety measure.
Absolutely, and that vote coming in there without any opposition, 40 in favor of it. Had a substitute apparently coming out of committee, as Jesse was mentioning earlier. Often in committee, the bills are revised, and when they come back to the floor, slightly different than they were in the first reader.
Correct. They refer to that as perfecting a bill or marking it up, trying to get rid of whatever needs to be changed in committee before it comes to the Senate floor or the House floor for a vote.
And now we see Senator Jack Hill.
I assume that's his grandchildren. I know his children are grown. Chairman Hill is the chairman of the Appropriations Committee in the Senate, a very, very powerful committee.
So we let girls gavel them in. So it's great. It's an honor to recognize former Senator from Northeast Georgia, Eddie Madden, on the floor. Thank you very much, Eddie. Good to see you. Good to have you down visiting with us today. Chair will recognize the senator from the 13th at this time.
Thank you, Mr. President. While we have a break in the action, I want to take just a moment to ask for your attention to welcome to the Senate floor an insect loved by millions all over the world's most famous mascot, Buzz.
That is, of course, Buzz, who is the mascot for the Georgia Tech Yellow Jackets. Maybe not the most famous mascot in the world, according to Senator Joseph Carter there. Of course, Carter is an alum of Georgia Tech, which is very near to you.
All right, there you go,
Are we going to get a chance to see Uga running up the aisle? I don't know.
Or at least Harry Dog, the guy who dresses up in the costume every football game.
Right. Senator Carter has been named one of the governor's floor leaders in the Senate. That's a bit of a break in what's been going on the past 4 years. The governor was using just committee chairman largely to cover some of his legislation in the body, but now he actually has a floor team.
Right. He went for a couple of years there in the Senate without really any floor leaders at all, but he's now got full teams in both the House and the Senate. And, you know, it's a good way to make sure that you've got someone who's looking out for your bill and who is shepherding it through the legislative process. So floor leaders are always very important to whoever happens to be the governor in Georgia.
You know, one change that came about in the committee process in the last few years is the appointments of what are called hawks in the House, and sometimes being used in committees.
That was an innovation of Speaker Richardson, yes. 3 members are designated as hawks. I mean, they literally have the word hawk on their name badge there, and they can swoop in and sit on any committee meeting they want to. Sometimes they do it if there aren't enough legislators there to have a quorum. Sometimes they move in if the Speaker perhaps is concerned that a bill might pass or might not pass, so they can go in and provide some votes to reflect the Speaker's wishes. So that's something we've only seen the last couple of years here in the House. Don't think they existed before then in the Georgia General Assembly.
Here. No, and of course haven't been used too much in the last couple of years. No. Actually, I overheard one in the hall yesterday bragging that he hasn't been to a meeting this year. So
that's right. They're just roosting there, so to speak, until they're needed.
But that is, of course, one way that the powerful House Speaker uses his power to influence legislation. We just mentioned the governor's floor leader in the Senate, of course, Rich Golick, representative in the House, is his floor leader on that side. Governor is clearly in another branch of our government, but what are some ways that he influences what goes on in the State House here?
Well, Georgia has a very powerful role for its governor, and perhaps he exercises most of his influence, or the biggest part of his influence, through the budget. Because the way our laws are set up, he has what they call a line item veto, in which he doesn't veto the entire budget, but he can mark out certain spending items, and if one of the items he X's out happens to be a project that's important to a local legislator in his district, that's more incentive for that legislator to go along with the governor's wishes, perhaps, on legislation. So the governor does have a lot of powers, and if he wants to exercise them, he can have a real influence over what moves in the Georgia General Assembly.
Well, we are, of course, staying tuned for what's going on in both the House and the Senate. We're going to go over to the Senate right now, where Senate Bill 71 is on the floor. This is yet another one of the GeorgiaSpeaks.com pieces of legislation introduced by a Georgia citizen.
High school in 1964. He's retired from the Navy after 25 years of service with the rank of Chief Petty Officer. And his idea was this. He said, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, y'all are having too many elections. You need to have elections on just certain dates. Well, I began to look at that, and we were having a lot of elections for SPLOS and other referendums, so it got to be where the more elections you have at odd times of the year, the less likely people are to go vote. Well, the truth of the matter is sometimes we only had 5% turnout for an election that taxed everybody. So we took his idea seriously, and we said we think that 2 times a year is enough. Once in November, which is when everybody knows there's an election, the second Tuesday, and we made one other opportunity in March. Now, in even years, we have primaries, which are normal times, and occasionally we have, once every 4 years, we have a presidential preference primary. But other than that, we don't want a lot of elections going on. We want to keep it simple, at least 2 times a year, and presidential primaries would be 3 times a year. So that's what the bill does. And I think Georgians will appreciate this bill. In fact, we wish there were more than 50% of the population going to vote. We think this will help that cause. So thank you to Buddy Eidson for bringing this to us. And for other Georgians, we'd also like your best ideas. Mr. President, if there are no questions, I'll yield the well.
And Senator Williams there wrapping up the discussion of Senate Bill 71, yet another one of the matters that was introduced on the GeorgiaSpeaks.com website that would limit the number of special elections and require that those be held with limited exceptions only in March or in November. We're going over to the House now where there's a presentation being given on HB 213, a deferred compensation bill.
I don't see any questions. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair has none of the previous questions ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which was favorable to the passage of this bill? Chair has none of the report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of the passage of the bill will rise, stand, and be counted. You can just raise your hand and they'll count you.
And this is a fascinating voting procedure here in the House, of course. They usually do use the electronic voting machines. He's asking for them to rise, stand, and be counted in this case. Have to assume perhaps the machine might be down. You know, Tom, I've always wondered, though, how with 180 members they're able to make these counts.
Well, he only asks for a show of hands, I think, on bills where he knows it's going to be pretty much a unanimous bill, because with 180 House members, there's no feasible way you could count that many yes and no votes. So I have not heard any reports on whether the voting machine is out or not, or whether they're just going to do this to speed things up. But
the ayes are 111, the nays 0. This bill, having received the requisite constitutional majority, is therefore passed. For those of you viewing, we do have an electronic roll call voting system. The chair has elected not to use that right now and to use it the old-fashioned way of standing and raise your hands. We have electronic key cards and we can light them up on this board, but chair has elected not to do that at this time.
That answers our question.
Indeed.
For information's sake, if 1/5 of the quorum present asks me to do a roll call vote, they can do it. So we need about 25 people to vote against that. Clerk will read the caption to House Bill 245.
House Bill 245, Representative Barnard, 166. The bill being entitled Act amending Title 35 relating to general provisions of law enforcement officers and agencies is repealed. Certain provisions relating to passenger motor vehicle for the warden of Georgia State Prison. Bill has been for the House Committee on Code Revision. The committee recommends do pass and the bill be read third time.
Gentlemen, hang on just a minute. Understand that we have the mascot from Georgia Tech, Buzz, who wishes to come on the floor.
And, of course, you see Buzz making his appearance in the House, as generally when there are special guests, they make their way to both the Senate and to the House. And so there you see the Georgia Tech mascot getting a hearty welcome in the House.
A bee with few words. Chair recognizes Representative Morris to explain House Bill 245.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House, when you hear about 245, it'll probably be just as odd as what you just saw. House Bill 245 that Representative Barnard introduced is a code revision that I believe it was sometime in the 50s. Some legislator introduced a bill that the State Patrol had to purchase and supply a vehicle for the warden at Reedsville State Prison. Now, first let me say this bill revision isn't to take away Warden Smith's car. Warden Smith is as good a warden as we've ever had in this state, and he's doing a good job. But who knows why it happened? I don't know. Maybe the State Patrol had Mercuries and the state had Buicks. I don't know, or somebody had a beef. But anyway, this would change that, and it would make the State Patrol not liable to buy a car for the warden at Georgia State Prison and would give that responsibility where it belongs to the Department of Corrections. And I believe that should be it. If there are any questions, I'll be glad to answer them. If not, Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
I don't see any questions. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair has none. The previous question is now ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee, which was favorable to the passage of this bill? Chair has none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of passage of the bill will vote yes. All and will rise, stand, and be counted.
And as you see, this is the process when a bill is brought down before each chamber. The main sponsor will present it, tell basically what it does or what it does in his or her opinion, and will ask for a favorable vote. You also saw Speaker Richardson ask if there were any questions. House members will use their electronic devices to basically get in the queue to ask a question. You didn't see that happen here. This is, of course, uncontroversial legislation, but oftentimes people ask questions, and well, those questions will be friendly or not so friendly sometimes.
You know, this being Family Day over on the Washington Street side of the Capitol, there's actually a vintage Georgia State Patrol car. I don't know if that dates back to the time of this bill that's being repealed at this point, buying a vehicle for the warden debt. One prison.
Yeah, one prison, indeed. Well, as I say, a lot of little laws like that on the Georgia books, and they're getting rid of a few of them here this morning.
Section 1610, relating to sheriff's duties, penalties, and electronic storage so as to change the frequency with which the sheriff reviews certain security plans. The bill having been for the House Committee on Judiciary and Non-Civil, the committee recommends the bill do pass by a committee substitute and the bill be read for the third time.
Chair recognizes Representative Jacobs for purposes of explaining the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members of the House, I bring before you today House Bill 51, which clarifies how often the sheriff of each county must review and revise their county's courthouse security plan to make it crystal clear that such a review must occur at least one time every 4 years. The significance of presenting this bill today is not so much in the clarification of this language, but in the fact that we are coming up on the second anniversary of the Fulton County courthouse shootings that occurred just a block away from here. In response to the horrific events of that day, the General Assembly acted last year to require in each and every county that the sheriff who is responsible for courthouse security, the judges who work in the courthouse every day, and the county commission that funds courthouse operations work together to create and implement a plan that keeps our citizens and public employees safe when they spend time in a building where justice, not harm, is supposed to be done. As a young lawyer with a new child less than 2 months old at home, that courthouse security plan is vitally important to me and my family. It is important to every family that they be able to feel safe and secure in our public buildings. The tragic events that began in the Fulton County Courthouse ended in a shooting in a residential area near Lenox Road in Atlanta, less than a quarter mile from my district. It is important to every family that they be able to feel safe and secure in their communities. The sheriffs and Superior Court judges expressed their support in committee for this clarification of the law. Members of the House, for our public employees, our families, and our communities, I ask you to help improve upon the courthouse security legislation from last year, and I ask for your favorable consideration of House Bill 51. Mr. Speaker, I yield the well.
Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? Chair has none. The previous question is ordered. Is there objection to adopting the committee substitute? Chair has none. The committee substitute.
And of course, some of these repeal measures going on in the House dating back quite a few years, but this one, of course, dealing with current affairs, Tom.
That's right. It was inspired by the case of a couple of years ago when Brian Nichols went on a shooting spree at the Fulton Courthouse. Several people were killed, and oddly enough, that happened the day before the last Family Day, as you remember. That's and right. It cast an unfortunate pall over that particular event because when that particular legislative day was held, I believe Nichols was still at large and had not been apprehended yet. So I think very appropriate that they would be bringing that bill up today as part of today's House calendar.
So looking at requiring the oversight for courthouse security to be more regular than perhaps it has been in the past.
That's right. More regular reviews by the sheriffs of their duties to keep courthouses safe and secure.
I remember when they finally apprehended Nichols, that was during the middle of the Family Day proceedings last year, and there was quite a response on the floor.
They announced it on the floor, and there was a lot of applause and cheering by the legislators, and rightfully so, because a lot of people had been very worried about that.
And certainly, that's just a block from us here. We're down at the Capitol Education Center, just across the street from the Capitol, and it certainly permeated the air.
It sure does, because the courthouse is so close to the Capitol.
And, of course, as you mentioned, quite a few legislators, including Representative Mike Jacobs, who presented that bill, are attorneys. So some of them actually practice in that courthouse building as well.
House Bill 220 by Representative Day of the 163rd. A bill to be entitled Act Amendment Title 28, relating to the General Assembly so as to repeal Chapter 8, relating to the Georgia Criminal Justice Improvement Council. Bill has been before the House Committee on Code Revision. The committee recommends the bill do pass and the bill be read the third time.
The chair recognizes the chair of the Public Safety and Homeland Security Committee, the gentleman from the coast, Representative Day.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. That was a real treat we had with Buzz there. I never knew Buzz was the guy. I mean a girl. Ladies and gentlemen of the House, I'm here to speak to the repeal of Title 28, Chapter 8, which established the Georgia Criminal Justice Improvement Council. This was established 26 years ago, and the gist of it was to have a mechanism by which the House and Senate could sort of get together and work with the criminal justice systems throughout the state. We have not had any activity in that committee before. For that matter, we've had no usage of it. And for that reason alone, I would highly recommend that we repeal this bill and do away with this unnecessary part of the law. If there are any questions, Mr. Speaker? If not, I'll yield the well.
I do not see any questions. Is there objection to the previous question being ordered? There's none. The previous question is now ordered. Is there objection to agreeing to the report of the committee which was favorable to the passage of this bill? Chair is none. The report of the committee is agreed to. Shall this bill now pass? All those in favor of passage of the bill will rise, stand, and be counted.
There, of course, you saw Representative Burke Days, the chairman of the Public Safety Committee in the House, presenting that bill. Now let's go over to the Senate and catch the action there.
This chamber and this body was created. As I would point out to particularly some of the young children that may be in the audience and on the floor, that remember way back when, in the 1800s, when this chamber was built, there were no lights in terms of electricity, and it was all different. The chandelier that you see above us was let down to where you could light the candles. The windows were open to cool the facility, and you see the fireplaces on each side that were actually used to heat the facility as well. A lot of long traditions. And when you look on the desk, you see where the microphone is. That used to be an inkwell. It's kind of ironic that we've come a long way, but we still have not forgotten our way in the way we conduct business. And so it's a great honor to share this with you. We appreciate your attendance and hope you will come back and visit us very often. We will be available for plenty of pictures, not that you want any with me, but for the senators. And we have the photographer here that's ready to take as many as you'd like. And at this time, it's time for us to do our announcements and our adjournment. And to do that, I call on the distinguished majority leader, the senator from the 19th, for a motion.
Mr. President, I move that the Senate stand adjourned until Monday at 1 p.m.
The Secretary will read the announcements.
Committee meeting scheduled for Monday, February 12, 2007, 10 o'clock a.m. Appropriations. The Subcommittee on Agriculture will be in 450 Capitol, 11 a.m. Finance.
And you'll hear someone with the clerk's office now reading when committee meetings are going to happen. That's very important for the senators to know when and where they're supposed to be to work on the legislation in early stages. Now, just a little heads up, what you're going to see right before the Senate goes into adjournment, you'll see Lieutenant Governor Cagle ask who's ready to vote on adjournment, and everyone will apparently vote that they are not ready to leave, and you'll see how he responds to that.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the Senate, a couple of things I want to call your attention to. First of all, you should have received a reminder on your desk a couple of days ago as it relates to local assistance grants. Please get those in by February the 15th. We need to have your documentation in by February the 15th. In addition, on Monday, we will be celebrating 4-H Day. So let me ask you to wear your green ties and wear your 4-H clovers on your lapel. Let's show the kids who participate in 4-H across this state how much we appreciate their hard work. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator from the 13th. Senator from the 32nd is recognized at this time for an announcement.
Thank you, Mr. President. Monday morning, we'll have the second person in charge of... Senator Whitehead's got a nice smile on his face. I think he might need to see Senator Hawkins for his dental needs. But Monday morning, we have the number 2 person for the Chinese embassy here. He will be in room 125 of the Capitol. It's very important for the state of Georgia to attract a new consulate for China to the state of Georgia, as well as Delta Airlines is looking for a direct route. So just wanted to bring it to your attention, Senator Whitehead and others, that they'll be available to me in room 125 of the Capitol. And Senator Whitehead, if you'd like to smile for the gallery too, I'm sure they'd be happy to see your nice blue teeth. Thank you, Mr. President.
Thank you, Senator. I'm glad we've got the senator from the 24th that's in a good mood this morning and wanting to entertain us all. The distinguished majority leader of the state Senate has moved that this body stand adjourned until Monday at 1 p.m. All of those in favor will say aye. Aye. All of those opposed, no. No. This Senate is continuing to want to work hard for the people of Georgia. The chair may be in doubt, but we will stand adjourned until 1 p.m. on Monday morning. All right.
And of course, you there heard the joke that just never seems to get old.
It's as new as it was the first time I heard it. They all love to say no when it comes time to adjourn, but the presiding officer will say, reluctantly, the ayes have it.
That's
we're out
right.
here.
And, of course, you see there we have the House where they have also adjourned, much to that same little inside-outside joke that they have every single day, where obviously the ayes will always have it. And they have adjourned until Monday at 1 p.m. for both chambers. They did have a chance to pass, as we said, those pieces of legislation in both the House and the Senate. Nothing particularly pressing today, but still business that the public was able to view.
That's right, and a good way to allow the people who normally wouldn't view a legislative session to see how the process works in the chamber on some, again, relatively harmless legislation that won't have any controversy, and I imagine everything passed by a unanimous vote as well.
I think that's the case. And, of course, we didn't see the points of personal privilege or the morning orders being used for any particular political gain this time around. I think perhaps a little backdoor talk as well as some in front of the camera action as well to keep that curtailed.
I think there was an agreement that everybody would be on their best behavior today. They didn't want a repeat of what happened a couple of years ago, and that was a very polite and courteous session, which, as we all know, is a rather rare thing over there sometimes, but good to see them being good sports about it all.
That's true. Well, I believe that we are going to be able to check in with Sandra one more time.
That's right. While we've been here in the studio observing some of the House and Senate action, Sandra's been up there with many of the families and some of the things that they have set up. They, of course, have a copy of the Declaration of Independence that was signed by Georgia and returned to Georgia that was lost for some time, but I think has been found in one of our state offices now. It's probably a good thing that they located that.
Somebody was literally leafing through an old leather-bound journal and made the discovery, well, good heavens, here's our official copy of the Declaration of Independence, so I guess we really are a free state after all.
Well, that was definitely a lucky find there as well. Well, we're going to be going to Sandra in just a few minutes, but we do have a few more moments just to talk about some of the key legislation that we can be expecting. You know, we have not yet seen either the supplemental budget or the 2008 budget, although we were told we were probably going to see it by this week. Had some snags there.
No, and it all goes back again to the peach care problem, which is one of the Appropriations Committee members told me it's driving everything. Until they can figure that out, it's hard to figure out how to plug that hole in the budget, because I believe in the supplemental budget it amounts to about $57 million, and in the budget for the next fiscal year it probably amounts to $131 million. So a lot of money even for the state of Georgia to make up, and nobody's come up really with the answer yet on how to do that.
Budget always holding up our session, it seems like, every year, maybe this year more than most. Now, as we mentioned before, Sandra Parrish is up at the Capitol with some of the families. I think earlier in the show we saw Senator Gloria Butler. Now she actually is joined by her family with Sandra Parrish. Sandra.
That's right. I do have Senator Butler here. Senator Butler, what have you thought of Family Day today?
Well, I think it's been a decent turnout. The people that are here, I'm glad to see them. This gives us an opportunity to see how the Senate works, because I am in the Senate. And the welcome that we gave them, I'm sure they really appreciate it. But I wish we were talking about some issues that they may be interested in, which are raising the minimum wage and the peach care issue. I wish we were discussing those things so that they could go back home and, you know, tell their neighbors that they really learned something from the issues that we talked about on today.
But you actually did take up several bills today.
Well, we did take up several bills, good bills that will benefit the state and the people of this state. I have with me my daughter, Leslie, her fiancé, D'Amico Moses, and his son, Jalen. And I think that they have enjoyed being here today and listening to the session and learning. And this is a day that the people of this state can come in and learn. So I'm glad to see that so many people came out.
Thank you so much. Reporting live from the Capitol, I'm Sandra Parrish for Lawmakers.
Well, thank you, Sandra, for all of those up-to-the-minute Family Day reports. And, Tom, we want to thank you for being here with us.
Great being here. Great being here.
Thank all of you for joining us for this Lawmakers Special broadcast of Family Day 2007. Coming up Monday on Lawmakers, the presidents of Georgia's 4 research universities. They're going to be talking about emerging technologies here in Georgia. Plus, we'll have all the latest from under the Gold Dome. Join us for those stories. That'll be on Monday at 7 p.m. And we want you, of course, to stay with us. We have more great programming coming up here on Georgia Public Broadcasting. We've enjoyed a very quiet Family Day here under the Gold Dome with both House and Senate actually saying that they were going to be going until about noon, but wrapping up a little early today.
They did wrap up a little early, and we should take the opportunity to plug ourselves, I think, here. Lawmakers will come to you every day that the General Assembly is in session. We run from 7 to 7:30. We keep you apprised of basically everything that happened that day, and we're glad to do it. We'll be on Monday through Thursday of this coming week.
That's right. Well, that's going to do it for us for this, the 17th Legislative Day of the Georgia General Assembly. I'm Wandy Lawson.
And I'm Jesse Freeman. Thank you so much for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day.